Well, hello, fine people. I'm Steph, the Educator, and welcome to Essential Pedagogy Podcast. I am so excited about talking with you about my perspective of what I've been experiencing with autism. But before we get into that, I want to just ask you to follow me on YouTube. Press subscribe. I need your support there. I'm trying to build my viewership up there. My hope is as a result of you listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, because some of us listen in our car, we can't always watch. And some of us, we enjoy watching people and seeing people's faces and expressions. So if you watch or you listen or both, to this podcast. I started this podcast so that people within my profession and outside of my profession can have more compassion for one another. So I just wanted to try to get a better understanding, because I found that in the general public, in this complex American education system, and it's getting more and more complex as we go on under this administration. The year is 2025. Just let you know, just in case I become famous and all this is time stamped. It's becoming more and more complex, and with complexity and my being a science teacher, there are times when I think deeply on some things, and autism is one of the things that I have a great experience in dealing with people with autism and having neurodivergence, at what we call neurodivergence. It's becoming more and more mainstream. So let's just talk about it. Let's talk about it. I became aware of autism about 20 years ago, after I had my son, and I started noticing different types of behavior than my older son. And I didn't know much about autism. I just knew that there were things that I was experiencing from when he was a baby that I didn't know whether things are normal or not or what have you. But the more I've learned about neurodiversity, I have learned that, a lot of my son's behaviors fall within this autism spectrum. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about my personal experience with my child or son, and I will tell you what I see and experience in the classroom, and just some little funny stories along the way. Also, I'm so into this topic that I follow someone on Facebook, and I'll tell you more about who I follow. He's kind of funny, and I like watching his videos because he's very informative, and he is on the spectrum, but he is, I hate to say high functioning, because really, if you are breathing, you're functioning. You are, thriving, and you can learn to thrive in different ways. So I hate to use that, but he has really become a good at camouflaging sometimes his discomfort if he experienced it, or when he's making his videos, he's making sure that he's the most comfortable. So anyhow, I'm going to tell you that these are some of the things that I noticed in my child early. One thing is, since he was a baby, this has been camouflaged or masked since then, but he sniffed from when he was a baby. I would smell him. Would hear him sniffing me. And from when he could talk, which I'll get back to that later. When he could talk, he would say, "Mommy, your hair smells good." Because I'd hold him and he'd sniff my hair, all that. "Your hair smells good." He would touch things. He would touch my shirt and rub it, and touch things and rub it. And he was highly had this sensory thing about him, which I didn't really connect that, right? He did not like the sound of the vacuum cleaner. He was one of the few toddlers that didn't desire really to go to Chuck E. Cheese because it was loud. He didn't like it. It was loud. He didn't really enjoy it. In fact, when he got older, probably like 6, we would go to Olive Garden. I think I was protesting McDonald's as early as him being 6 or 7. And we would go to Olive Garden instead because I felt like Olive Garden had the same pricing structure as McDonald's, but healthier food for my children. He even said Olive Garden was loud. I was like, well, dang, well, where can we go? Because it's really, but I feel like certain noises like clinking of forks on plates, that bothered him. What else? Oh, he walked on his toes. It wasn't super evident until you see the shoes that are worn in a certain way. Yeah, he has an arch that we probably should have taken him to, a podiatrist to see about his feet. He talked in a Mr. Professor way, like actually would correct us. He was very blunt with his speech as far as his friends were concerned. He would talk to them and say things bluntly, whether it was received as nice or not. He would prefer not to go and he wanted to play with the ball, a certain ball, did not want to share. And so his options was you either share or you come in the house and you don't have the ball. And his choice was every time come in the house. It didn't faze him. Or I would try to put a consequence out there. Okay, then you can't go with us to such and such place, or we're getting ready to go to the store, or we're getting ready to go over our friend's house. The whole family's going, but I don't think you're going to be able to go because you're not doing this. This was my way of trying to get him to do, but he was very stubborn, and he'd be like, okay, then I won't go. I'll stay by myself at home. So it was hard to come up with consequences for someone that was really rigid and difficult. So yeah. So those are the things that I experienced at home. Fast forward to, well, not really fast forward. That was kind of ongoing. He didn't really look at people in the eye much. He gave off the appearance of shy, like an ultra shy child. But he really had interest, and he was a likable kid once you got to know him. But fast forward with my career. Okay, I got this question, but I'll talk about that later. So I got this career, I'm a teacher, and I got probably introduced to autism probably my 5th or 6th year teaching, and I've been teaching now like 22 years. And so I remember getting paperwork and little synopsis and notified that I had a child that was identified as autistic in my classroom. And not only that year did I have an autistic kid in my classroom, I had a Tourette's child, and I had not one, but I had two in the same class, two autistic children that was diagnosed with autism, and one that was diagnosed with Tourette's, same class. And they followed one another to the same classes almost every day because they were in a gifted and talented track. Okay, we'll get back to that in a second. That was a very interesting year. I learned a lot. I had to actually go to training really for the more so for the Tourette's, but then at the same time, I got training on how autistic people who are diagnosed with autism and Tourette's diagnosis people, how they interact and how they can repel each other and get in conflicts. And I did experience that on occasion. So it was very, very difficult for me to adapt, but I did. And I actually had those kids 2 years in a row. And that's unusual for the looping to happen in public school, but we were trying something one year where I taught these gifted kids, or all of the sixth grade class that I had. We just looped the same kids with you that second year as seventh graders. So it was very fascinating. I would not trade that experience in the world, even though it was very, very difficult. I had two children that was diagnosed with autism in the class. I had a Tourette's child, but not only that, I had 33 consistent children in that class at that time, and I taught science. And my class was not built for 33 kids. And at some point, that number crept up to 37. And when it crept up to 37, I marched my butt inside my principal's office, and I said, "You teach 37. I will not teach 37 kids." I already had to split the students' lab days because I only had enough lab table space for probably 26, 27 kids. 33 was just too much with equipment and glass and possible cutting items and thermometers that were made of glass and just different chemicals, things like that. So I absolutely had to put my foot down as an educator to do that. What I have increasingly seen over the years is an uptick in the number of people diagnosed with autism in my class, where it used to be I had one or two a day, because I taught 5 to 6 classes, 7 classes some years, to now I have 1 to 2, maybe 3 in every class that I have. And maybe there's 2 definitely diagnosed and have accommodations. Now, I'm saying this because I feel like the neurodivergent is very fascinating. I sometimes am what my mother would call tickled by some of the things that happen in my classroom. And sometimes it's so challenging that I'm literally exhausted. And so there's a phenomenon of an uptick and of of people diagnosed, and there's people who aren't diagnosed, because there's been an uptick, I feel like, in masking. Now, I feel like autism is not really a new phenomenon. I feel like autism has existed since the beginning of, like, there is a man that I knew from college who was definitely neurodivergent and gifted, that he entered my university that I attended, and he never left. In fact, he passed away, still not attending school, but being very much a part of the school culture and on the campus. I don't know how old Butch was. I can't remember, but Butch was definitely in his 70s, if not 80s. And if he was definitely autistic. So it's not something new, but it is definitely a phenomenon that I see an increase in the classroom. And I think some of the characteristics are becoming more and more obvious, and more how can I explain? Like our environment has massaged the characteristics to where it bubbles up in even more dramatic ways. I feel like in class, I feel like the experience of being autistic is exploding out of children, where it was masked and managed within and out. I don't even know if it was managed within, because I'm not autistic, so I don't know how how they manage things within, how they feel within. I do know that autistic children have sleeping issues, so sometimes they may have a hard time going to sleep at night, and so then they're tired in the classroom. And so I want to talk a little bit more about how autistic children present themselves at school, and how sometimes those things can be different at home. So at school, what I see is sometimes a very matter of fact type of speech pattern that creates a Mr. Professor type expertise feeling that you have. And sometimes because of their hyper interest in things, that science sometimes tends to be a place where they gravitate to having a hyper knowledge about some things. So then they can tend to sound Mr. Professor-ish or Miss Professor-ish in class. I've had some girls, the increase in girls being diagnosed as autistic or having autistic traits have increased, but I have many boys that are diagnosed, and I have an idea about why. I think girls are more in tune about what is accepted socially, and they study people at an early age socially, because more is expected from girls socially, I think, at an early age than boys. So then they learn to mask it. They learn to identify, oh, I'm not supposed to do this, or the reaction of someone else when I do this. So then they change the way they interact with people. So let's talk about what I see in the classroom. I see the Mr. Professor type pattern of speech in communicating. Whether you are listening or not, they're going to tell you, or whether you want to know all the details, they're going to tell you. And sometimes they don't tell you enough. I see, like, especially when they're the students who are in a good mood that have autistic traits, they may walk on their tiptoes, may not always, may walk on their tiptoes, and when they are happy, you will see almost a skip, right? Like skip right on their toes. They may have um, uh, I'm not even going to talk about that because that right there is probably a stereotype. But may walk on their toes, have a Mr. Professor type cadence of communicating, will blurt out things inappropriate time, as if like we're working on something independently, and they are finding some discomfort of some sort, and they will blurt out what their discomfort is, what they don't like or find frustration, and yell, and trying to help them reframe and regulate is it's something that we have to do. Not wanting to be touched, or them wanting to touch you sometimes, or touch something they think might stimulate them. Having toys. A lot of autistic children also have double diagnosis with other things like ADHD, anxiety, depression. Oh, I wrote this down. A sleep disorder, gastro issues. The CDC defines autism as social communication difficulties, strong interest in sometimes having repetitive behavior, sensory sensitivities like sound, light, touch, have high. This is sometimes looked at as, or most times looked as a positive, high memory of what they see. They have great musicality or art or math skills, or really may have a high interest in science. And since they tend to be good at math and not as good in English, it's just a trend that I see, that they're not as good at communicating verbally or written. Sometimes they are slow to speak, sometimes not speaking until 6 years old. I remember my son, he had a hard time getting what he needed out, and I had to stop his grandmother from saying things for him. So she would be in the room and she said, "What do you want? You want ice cream? You want this? You want that?" And she would hold things up, and because he couldn't get it out, and I would just stop her and say, "Let him speak. Let him talk. If you talk for him, he will never learn to speak." I remember distinctively telling her that. He was slow to potty train. But anyway, that's off the topic of being in the classroom. But yeah, they tend to get in conflicts with students who may not be aware. They may be so high masking that they do not show their neuro difference until certain certain environments or certain types of transitions in the classroom. Say, for instance, we're doing a activity where we're doing whole class. We're doing something as a whole class. Get your Chromebooks out or get your paper out. We're writing this down. Right? Then we transition to, okay, you do a little bit on your own, you do a little bit on your own. Now we're going to get into groups and we're going to do something hands-on with a group. Now we, if you don't tell your child that has autistic traits that they're going to be working with a certain group of people, then they may go berserk over that. So sometimes it's good for you to find out, like, hey, who do you like working with? Who would you prefer to work with in this room? Take a look around and see who you can work with well, because when there's a clash, sometimes there's a big clash. and it's not friendly friend. It's not. And I tend to have the most autistic numbers of autistic children in the beginning of my classes, like the early in the day, because they tend to be better at math than they are in other topics. And so then math is scheduled in the afternoon. So I would have them more so earlier in the day. So then that means I need to be rested well, because lots of them are routine, very high routine, very good with time, or awful with time. So if they're good with time, they're super early. So they're at my door. Like if tutoring is at 7:30, they may be there at 7:15, 7 o'clock, waiting on me and asking me questions. They got questions ready. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm not even finished with my coffee. Give me a moment. Okay. Miss Powell needs a moment. Okay. All right. So that is just how demanding interactions can be with autistic children that has autistic traits. So the question earlier was about, what about late diagnosis? What about parents who don't know? So when it comes to autism, it's been connected to genetics. So when there are a lot of parents who have more, if they have multiple children, they have more than one child with autism. Say, for instance, they have 4 children. They are these 2 parents that have children together. It's very quite possible that they will have different functioning kinds of autism, neurodiversion type people in the same family. So they may have a set of twins, and both twins, whether they are identical or whether they are fraternal twins. I had a girl and a boy autistic siblings in class. They were in different different class periods, but they both had me as a teacher, and they're very different. I've dealt with parents who have multiple children in their family, not just twins, but multiple children in their family, or just one autistic child. It is connected to genes. So there is something that a parent has passed on from one child to another, from them to their child, that is trackable now that we know more. And sometimes they do not see these signs because maybe they are experiencing some of the same characteristics and they feel like it is normal. Or I wouldn't say normal. It's not abnormal, okay? It is normal to them, and everybody's normal is different, but they are feeling that they don't have any diversion from what we would call mainstream experiences. We'll just say that. So if you are experiencing, if you don't like loud noises and your house is very quiet, and then your children have that same type of sensory sensitivity, then you may not even notice that this is something that everybody in the world is not experiencing, unless you are because a lot of times you've gravitated to professions where it's quiet. An accounting person, it's quiet in their profession, where in my profession it's loud all the time. I hear 10, 20, sometimes hundreds of voices at the same time. So that is not something that most autistic people would be, gravitate towards being a teacher. And if they do, maybe that noise is not their sensitivity. Maybe it's light. Maybe it's their sensory with touch. Maybe that is it. But usually they do experience some type of sensitivity with sensory in some capacity. I want to tell you about 10 signs in adults, because there are a lot of adults that have not been diagnosed with autism, and we'll get into that a little bit. And I'll tell you who I follow on YouTube and watch his videos to learn more about autism. So he talks about 10 signs of adults. Signs in adults that he has never seen. He's always seen in people who were diagnosed with autism, always. And it's not always consistent in people who are not neurodivergent. So these 10 signs, he says: hyperfocus, sensory sensitivity. And that comes out with, I like a certain chair. I like the feeling of certain things. I focus on how bright a light is or not, or sounds. That brings me to number 2, background noises. They tend not to be able to ignore it, like the hum of a refrigerator or copy machine. They may be able to hear that, or tapping a pencil. Things, just little things they may not be able to ignore. So what we see in the classroom is that they may need a small group to do testing in. Bright lights could be a certain sensory that can make them feel overloaded or not enough light. Number 3 is memorizing weird details. They're hyper focused on certain things, like how you might walk or what you smell like. I've had kids say, you smell very good. Like my son would comment on, he would know that I went to the hairdresser after work, and I didn't tell him like my agenda, like I'm going to go get my hair done or anything. When he was a baby, like 1, 2, he's like, you get your hair done, mommy. Because he smelled how my hair, noticed how my hair smelled when I first got my hair done, as opposed to when, it was 2 weeks ago. It was interesting. So they memorize weird details, like how people hold things in movies and maybe get stuck on that part of the movie. They think from a bottom up processing instead of top down, which is, a lot of people think of a big picture then into smaller details, where I feel like, I know people who experience autism, and he says it, they are on small details and then zoom out. And that is why their processing may be slower than others. Rules for things. They have rules for things that nobody necessarily care about. They zone out in conversation sometimes because they're processing something that you might say or how you say it, and then they have missed like paragraphs of your conversation, and they didn't mean to, but they were hyper focusing on that part of the conversation, and their processing time was slow to process what you were saying. Overthinking, overanalyzing. They struggle with time. They're either very early or very late because they get so pulled into a task that you literally have to, like with shutting down for the class. I have several classes in a day. They're 45 minutes long. I have to make it a point to give time for pack up, because a student may be so hyper focused on a task that everything is everywhere, and it's going to take them another 5-6 minutes to get packed up and ready to go out the door to the next class. So I got to be very diligent in that. But they adapt. They really do. They adapt. Food textures, eating habits, moods, mood swings. Over and under explaining is number 10. Mood swings is number 9. 8 was food texture. Struggling with time was number 7. Overthinking, overanalyzing. And that sometimes can come out as professor, I'm the expert type cadence. The person that came out with this list and has video on his YouTube channel is called Auticate, is AUTICATE. And he has very, very humorous style with approaching his videos, and I really appreciate it. Another show I watch to understand autism a little better is Love on a Spectrum. And it really does make me have more compassion for my students with autism, and help me to understand my life better. Like, I feel like as I get older, it's harder and harder and harder to date out in these streets, man. I'm telling you, getting that right fit. And so then so when I see some of the difficulties that the characters, I wouldn't say characters, the people on Love on the Spectrum, which is on Netflix, I watch it. They have about 3 seasons, I think. And then they have it also in the UK, I believe, or Australia. They have an American version, and then they have a version outside of the US. And let me just tell you, it's been an eye opener. Like, sometimes I wish I had some of the characteristics of getting to the point. Because let me tell you, when I see these autistic people, adults, when they date, they pretty much get to the point of, I don't think you're going to be a good fit for me. You like this, I like that. No, you want kids. I'm not even going to bend on the fact that because I just don't want kids, or I want kids, you don't. And so see you later. This was our first date. Goodbye. I really admire that. They don't waste time, and I'm learning lessons from them. Like, look, stop dragging this on with people you know. I very much I feel like I am very, very intrigued with people who exhibit autistic traits, because I have a son that I struggled with, and now have a better understanding of how he shows affection towards me, because he's not a big touchy-feely person anymore. It has evolved to him just being kind of standoffish and things like that. His communication style is different. And so it took me some getting used to, but I love him very much. I had to have time to understand how he expressed himself, and or sometimes how he doesn't express himself. And I find that I understand my students better because I deal with some of these things that bubble up in my own personal life. It takes a lot out of me, and I am positive it takes a lot out of parents, because when we see things at school, we see a lot of masking or camouflaging of autistic traits, or what by the time students get to high school, middle school and high school, they have had so many experiences to where they understand that some of the behaviors that they exhibit um, uh, creates a certain reaction. So they've learned to mask or camouflage so much, and it takes so much out of them during the day that when they go home, they fall apart, they explode, they are they let it out so much more, let out their emotions so much more, that because they were holding so much in at school. And so I try to provide an environment where everybody can be themselves, and I respect wishes of people within what I can do. I can't always have uh, um, a child who wants to work by themselves on lab experiments, because we don't have enough tools for this, and we have to learn to work in community and with other people. So that's part of the socialization that we provide. But I can offer some choice in who a child prefers to work with out of all the people they have that they're in the room with. So I can do that. I can act with a compassionate heart, and when we have difficulties, that we have discussions and come up with resolutions that both, I as the educator and the child as a learner can thrive in. So that is my goal. I love learning about this, and I wanted to give you guys my point of view of autism and how it shows up in the classroom. I have had a child to be diagnosed late, like in middle school, high school. And sometimes people are not diagnosed until they've been masking so long or camouflaging so long. They don't get identified until adulthood. And so I just like for everybody to understand that we're not alike, but that doesn't mean that we're not loving people, that people deserve not to be given a chance to be related to at their level. And so I just want people to understand that there is an uptick, an increase of diagnosis of autism, but with that uptick, I see many, many more students who are masking some characteristics of autism, and having those effects affect them in the classroom. Um, I don't know what is causing this uptick. I would not think it's rumored in some circles. It's believed, but has been debunked scientifically, I will say, that vaccines are connected to increase in autism. I don't believe that. I believe that genetically, uh, humans have changed over time, and it's something probably to do with our environment, but we have changed over time, not all from one particular stimulus, but something has changed to where our inner fiber, our genetics has changed. So it's not bad or good, but it is something that has happened to help us to survive in our environment. That is what evolution is. Now, I don't believe in evolution of, the monkeys becoming humans. uh, so that is not true. But I do believe that things change over time, or you adapt to your environment. Like, we're in the South, we don't have a lot of thick hair on our bodies to keep us warm because it's hot, right? Or sometimes we have more hair on our bodies in the wintertime than we do in the summertime. You may not notice that, but that does actually happen. But yeah, I am very fascinated by this topic. I'm not the expert, but I will say that I have a lot of experience in dealing with children one-on-one and in group settings that have autistic traits. And I am very fascinated and I love them. And I hope that everybody learns more about autism because it is a phenomenon that is increasing and everybody deserves to be understood. So, guys, until next time, I'll be back in 2 weeks. I am here every first and third Thursday, and I'll have more topics to come. I am working on guests, but boy, I tell you, people don't like talking, or they do, but only what they want to talk about. And sometimes people feel like they want to talk or they feel like they want to talk, but then when it comes down to crunch time to be interviewed or really talk about things that they know they're very shy or scared of backlash from what they're going to say. But what I will say to that is people are always going to have something to say about what you have to say or whatever your expertise is, or there's always going to be some misunderstanding among people, but that does not have to keep us quiet. Like, I felt passionate about this topic, so I'm going to talk about it. And I hope to see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for watching Essential Pedagogy, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you. Yeah.